Hey everybody, it's Book of Catherine. I hope you're doing well. So I just want to give some tips. I've been watching Dr. Phil because I'm recovering from that huge thread this morning on BASF in the Catholic Church, with all the stuff we discovered with New Jersey and Chris Christie and everything. Um, just lots and lots. And also doing I'm a Bee yesterday. So anyway, what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about were some tips on a totally different subject, is socialization skills. Um, there are just some tips that I can give you if you're having a hard time talking to someone new, whether it's to meet the opposite sex on dates or chat with them or get to know them or like cold calls or meeting a salesperson or going to a new work office and connecting with people in a new work environment, anything like that. That if that's awkward for you, forming new relationships is awkward for you one on one. I do have that video that I need to get. It's just going to require so much editing. It's going to take a while of me talking to my closest neighbor and what that was like. I've listened to it all the way through, and I'm like, there's a lot of tips I need to work on for me. But I realized as I was watching this guy in this clip in this Dr. Phil today, I was like, oh dear, like there are things that were very different from what I did. There's a reason I was able to talk to my neighbor for so long and form a good relationship and a solid relationship where we can be neighbors and be friendly. Whereas he made negative impressions with like every girl that he met. But I realized those are skills that I had to learn. They're actually skills that I had to learn because I wasn't socialized well in my home. So these are skills that, like one of his friends actually said it. He's like, I used to tell him to be open and honest with everybody. And I was like, you did what? Like, you did what? He's like, and now I'm thinking he should pull it back and like maybe take it a little, like take it, like stay a little bit more guarded and bring it in. And that's when Dr. Phil was like, that's great advice. And that's what I mean about keeping people out and then letting them in slowly. One of the things, a skill that I had to learn in the way to do that is we tend to, some people who are not socialized tend to have a face that reads like an open book. Like when they meet somebody, everything that person says, they react to on their face. Like if they don't like what the person says or if they don't agree with it, they go, or, or, or whatever, or like, oh. And it's you when you hear people, they say you read like an open book. That's become more and more prevalent in our society because we're online so much and because we're used to reacting to things online and also sharing our opinion online. And we've almost individuated in that way so much more that we are not used to interacting with a person one on one as an equal. What happens is, in order to form relationships in person, if what you don't realize is that if you react to everything they say, like, oh, I don't like that, or how could you do that, or ah, da, 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 oh, da, da, and you're an open book, what you're actually doing is you're judging every single thing that person, you're casting judgment on every sentence that they say. And you'll see that in this clip. Everything the girls say, like down to like, I did a triathlon, or I do this sport, or I chose to do this, or I chose to do that. He had a reaction for. He had some kind of face for. Now, he may have been taught like that's what you do. That's how you show that you're listening. And a socialization skill is to actually go ahead and to, sorry, I'm not wearing my wedding ring. Wedding rings have been really, really painful. I have a few. I've had to get three different ones based on my pain level. So depending on my pain. So that's why I don't have. That's why when you see it on and off, it's depending on my pain level whether I can wear it or not. So it's I realized didn't understand. They weren't ready for my husband when he was down on the trail or whatever. And I know that could be because my ring's not always on, and it can be very, very painful. I don't wear jewelry all the time. Or you can see like when I'm not doing well, I never have jewelry on, right? So anyway, that's a side thing. But socialization skills is like when you're listening to a person, to show them that you're listening, you listen, you go, uh-huh, uh-huh, oh, okay, uh-huh, uh-huh, mm-hmm, and you show that you understand what they're saying. All right, all right, oh, I hear you, I hear you, like, I hear you. You're not, it's unsociable and uncivilized to be like, show all your personality and just show all your judgments. Internally, you can have your reaction. Internally, you can be like, wow, I don't like that, or I do like this, or I don't like that. But instead, you're learning about the person and show them that you're willing to learn about them. And that's being socialized, is to sit there and listen to the person and to actually hear them out and then be like, I'm okay with being around somebody who's different from me. If you continue to make these faces, every time you do that, you're telling the person that you're not okay with being around someone who's different than you. And that may not be what you think you're doing. You think that you're being like, well, I'm being open and honest. I'm being honest about myself. Well, open and honest is only something they started saying in the last 25 years. Like, that's a very unhealthy way to do things. Be open and honest with, no, people are not trustworthy. They have to gain your trust. There are people who are trustworthy in this world, and there are people who are not trustworthy in this world. And you shouldn't be sharing your internal thoughts, feelings, and opinions with anybody until you've learned that they're trustworthy. And so what you're doing when you meet somebody, a stranger or somebody that you have to work with, is while you're listening to them, and you're showing that you're listening, you're teaching them that you're trustworthy, as you don't cast all your thoughts. They know you don't, unless you go, I agree with that. They know that you're not saying I'm agreeing with you. You're saying I'm listening. I understand. Don't say out loud, I understand, but just like you do on a phone. Oh, that's it. Okay. Oh, no kidding. No kidding. No kidding. That's a really nice neutral statement to say. No kidding. All right. All right. And you're learning about them. And internally, you cataloging it and being like, okay, this is what I'm learning about this person. I'm listening and I'm learning and I'm listening, I'm learning. And as you do that and just show that you're willing to listen without being like, they learn that you're a safe person to be around. They learn that you are not going to judge everything that you say. They know that you're different, but it also means that you're safe, that you're okay with them, with you being who, because what's happening is, I want you to think about it from the other side. Flip it around and think about when you're talking to a person. Flip it around in your head and think about when you're talking to a new person and you're telling them all about something that you're really excited about, and it's a new stranger or whatever, and you're like, oh, I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and oh, I did that. And how do you like it when they're like, really? Huh? Versus, would you rather have them just go, oh, okay, oh, interesting, or whatever? And that's being polite. You would rather have them go, and just listen to you if they disagree with you. When you're just listening to a person, it's not saying I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's not saying I'm on the same page with you. It's saying I understand you and I'm willing to listen to you and I'm hearing you out and I'm learning about you. You're saying, I'm listening. Interesting. All right. I'm listening. And they're learning that you're trustworthy to be around and you're safe and that you're not going to explode on them in any second with if they do something that you don't like or disagree with. It means you can be self-possessed around them no matter how they act. And so that's what you want. You want to learn from another person that however you act, think about what you want when you're talking to a person, how you want them to act. And that what happens is that both of you in a civilized conversation, you're both listening and you're both saying things. And then when you say something, when you hear something as you're listening, if you finally hear something that you're really interested in or something that really like you can relate to, then you go, no kidding, I did this when, then you pick up on it and you respond to it and say, if they say, well, actually, like my next door neighbor actually said in the conversation, you'll hear it if I ever get this thing up. They're like, well, when I lived out in California, and I didn't go, oh, I lived in California. I didn't jump on it and go like, I lived in California. I didn't do that at all. I waited and I listened to what he had to say about California. And then I said, yeah, we actually lived in California too. And this is what we noticed. The developers came through too. So I waited and I let him speak. And then I spoke and I said what we noticed in California as well. And I built upon what he said. He had pointed out the developers, so I talked about the developers. I built upon it so that there was this building of like, and then when I said this about this, I said, we noticed this about trails. Then he brought something up about trails. So it did this back and forth of like, you pick up on things in the story that the person just told. You wait for something that you can relate to and something you're experienced in your life. And then you go ahead and you build on that. And so you're really like building. And then you wait for something. The next person says, oh, I can add a platform to that. And then they add another story to that, and then you wait and you hear them out, and then you build it, and then you respond to that when you finally hear something that you can add to the conversation. That's where that term came from, add to the conversation. And if you don't have anything to add from the conversation, that's great, because that's when you learn a lot. Like in this video, it was amazing because a lot of times I end up doing all the talking. It's very interesting on when I did cruise ships, which I think is hysterical now that I did cruise ships. I think that's because that's what we were like, oh, vacation. We went away. We went away from, you say, well, one was Alaska. So, but, we sailed away instead of, well, we'd also did, what am I saying? I've done 47 states. Okay. So I'm like, wait a minute. That's it. Part of my positive attitude of being this way is that I can say I have such a rich history. I lived my dreams while I was mobile, much more mobile. And so I can utilize that. But what was interesting in this conversation that I was disappointed in myself in is that I was constantly defining myself as on my disabilities. And I was asking myself, I barely talked in the conversation. For me, on the cruise ships, I found myself in those conversations doing most of the talking. They just wanted to hear my stories, or I ended up running because we would have a huge table, and I was really good at like making sure everybody would be heard or whatever and stuff like that. Or I was really good at this skill of building on or whatever. And we would always be the last table there. We'd always shut down the night. We'd be the last table. We'd talk all night long, the whole table. It was really great, no matter where we were. And so I found it interesting that with this neighbor, he did most of the talking. And I'm fine with that because I learned so much from him. I learned so much about the area. And you'll notice in the thing how many times I asked questions. Like I realized how knowledgeable he was. So he's like pointing out vines. And I was like, oh, are those bad? Like, can you tell me more about them? Like, that's the other thing you can do. You can be like, if you hear something that you want to learn more about, always look at every conversation you have as a learning opportunity. It doesn't mean steal somebody's labor. I've seen that in workplaces too, where somebody just asks the older person or the person higher up or like a dad figure or, I've seen women do this too, where they'll just be like, train me, like do all my training, show me how to do my job or whatever. Or young men that do that, they just turn to the assistant or the supervisor and they break it all the time and they're like, here, fix it. And they love breaking things. That's not what I mean. Don't build conversations that way. Like, that's not what I mean. I think you understand I'm talking about just talking with each other. Like, just this is pure on conversations with someone you've never met. So one thing is to like have a listening face. There is such a thing as a listening face. It's not revealed to the world and a strange person everything of your inner thoughts and your inner emotions. You're not supposed to be an open book. They should learn about you through the things that you say. You should be listening, and then they learn about you through the things that you say. It's one of the things that gets me in trouble the most is that I have emotions. So if you'll see it on the tape, he actually brings up my writing and it freaked me out. It freaked me out, my writing so much. So you can, I felt it on the tape. I would just like have this huge whoosh come out of me. And I was like, ooh, like the poor guy didn't know I got ultra protective, because when you're online, it's a very dangerous thing to do, to put yourself online. Like I really don't recommend it unless you have people who can protect you. If you know things about self-protection and bodyguards and all that kind of stuff, if you know things about self-protection, I really don't recommend getting online. It is no different than becoming Dr. Phil. When you watch things like paparazzi, you really have to know a lot. And so I freaked out. Like I had an automatic freak out self-defense mechanism of like, because I hadn't told him that part of myself and he knew something about me that I don't tell my neighbors. I don't tell anyone in my private business. Do you know what I mean? Like, not that I'm out ever. And that's just one of those things. And so I got super, and I was like, oh, that just came out of me. And that I really wish he didn't, like, I don't think he picked up on it at all. The conversation just kept going, but it's something I need to work on. Like it's something I need to work on. And instead of being like freaked out about my writing, I need to be proud of it. Cause he's like, oh yeah, like Steinbeck, like it's a really big honor to meet you. Like I love writers. Like I read Steinbeck and God, I love Steinbeck. Do you know what I mean? Like Steinbeck is one of my favorite writers. And it could have been a great moment of like coming together in the joy of writing. And I don't think of my writing like that. I don't think of what I do today as writing. I probably should. I think of my old writing and I think of like, oh, like, and YouTube, I think of YouTube and I think of like, okay, I do like, be protected, you know, like, you know, like I got frightened basically. And that's the one time is when I got frightened is when I showed any sort of like internal of like what was going on. Everything else I was talking about. And that's the nice thing though, is that when you choose to start using your words, so that's what I was saying. It's my biggest struggle because I'm so emotional. I've been up in the house and also I was in a lot of pain. I just done a big walk and it was towards the end of the conversation. I was in a lot of pain. So I guess I should give myself a break on that, but it's something I need to work on and start working on, you know, feeling joyous about my writing instead of seeing it as anything to be, scared of in a way. Um, and or at least seeing it from other people's point of view. Does that make sense? Um, that it can be seen as something so great. So yeah, I need to kind of flip that in my head. Um, I just don't write about safe things. I never have. I never have. Anyway, that's on something totally different. But yeah, you can just have really good conversations and have amazing uh, social skills by talking to people just by having a listening face that says, I think you're created equal with me. Whether or not this relationship goes any further, like I want to have, okay, think of it this way. If you go on a date with somebody, let's say you may not end up dating, but it can still be a connection. It's still somebody you can learn from. You can always learn from somebody. So always just be like, I'm interested in learning about you. If it's going to be, it's going to be. If we're going to hit it off, we're going to hit it off. And all your job to do on a first date is to like get through the awkwardness. It's always going to be awkward in the first date. And your job is just to get through that beginning part until you can relax and kind of get each other's humor and start actually finding things you can connect on and talk about in some kind of relaxed way and get past that. This is supposed to be a date point, right? Does that make sense? So your first job to get in there is just to be like, I want to learn about you. Like, and I think you're created with equal with me, and teaching that person that you think that, because they don't know anything about you. They don't know anything about you. And that's the first impression you want to make is that, I believe in created equal. No matter whether or not we get along, you are still somebody that I could know or to have their card, or we could do business with in the future, or I could hook you up with somebody later on, or you're just someone I could have a connection with further down the line. But whatever it is, when this time together is over, I want to leave at least shaking hands and saying it was nice to meet you and get something out of it. You can get something good out of any conversation. You really, really can. It's really, really, if you know how to be sociable. And so it's really, think of it more as a way of teaching the person that they can trust you, teaching the person they don't know anything about you. And your job is to present yourself as somebody that is interested in what they have to say and that doesn't think that you're less than them. Like so many people out there are users and abusers. Your first job is to teach that person that you're not a user and abuser. And the number one way you can do that is just by listening. And you don't even have to say much, but you can listen. And while you listen, like, for example, this one woman said that she was a triathlete, right? Right there, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about triathletes. Can you tell me about that? Like, tell me about triathletes. Like, what does that entail? Like, where does that go? And if you approach it from that point of view, you'd be amazed at how far you can go and get along. And approach dates that way, approach working, and if they bring up something you don't know anything about, be like, teach me about that. Like, I'm so curious. And that will make you so much of a bigger person and make it easier the next time you're in a conversation with someone you don't know and they bring up something, you have a better shot of knowing what they're talking about and having something to build on. And so that's one of the things I was really shocked about with this guy is he was talking about all of these things and all I talked about was my disability the very few times I talked, and I was like, what the heck's wrong with me? And I realized all I could think of was I needed a reason why I'm never out of the house. We've been here for so long. Please don't expect me to keep being it. Please don't, please, like, please, because I knew I'd scare them if they saw me again crawling on the ground. Does that make sense? I was like, I know I'm upright now. I know I'm upright right now. And I appear as a healthy person to you right now. Please don't think of me as a healthy person because please don't, because you're going to have to see some ugly things. Now, you know me, and that, he may walk upon me crawling on the grass. Does that make sense of what you saw? And I was so protective of, like, I have, but I need to start rephrasing it. I need to socialize the way that I do that. I didn't pick up on any of the other, I didn't talk about any of my travels. I'm like, I know all these things. And I didn't talk about any of it. Like, I didn't talk about writing or anything. I didn't talk about any of it. And I'm like, wow, wow, wow. I was so like, please set low expectations of me. Like, please set low expectations of me. But that's what I need to do with friends. Like, it's just my neighbor. I don't need to do that. And so it's, I don't know. So I have these are things that I'm dealing with as I'm learning to socialize again. Um, and, but I think also part of it had to do with, boy, they knew a lot of things about things I have nothing about. Like, he knew a lot about horticulture. Now, I have been around a lot of places and I've been in a lot of parks, and I didn't know anything about anything he was talking about. I had a hard time building. I was like, he knew things about spiders, and I had like one spider story, like one, that was it. Like, I was like, ooh, like, I knew a little bit. I was able to build up a little bit on it and stuff. So you'll see it when I post the tape or whatever. But I learned so much. I mean, it was a really great conversation. I learned so much so that next time when we went on a walk and he was still there, I was able to introduce him to my husband. And one thing that I noticed at the end was that I was the one that said, I'm so sorry, what's your name again? I asked for his name and I reached out to shake his hand. That's another, like, part 2 of socialization, is that that's always, if you want to end on a good note or whatever, and you have to leave, just say, like, what was your name again? Get their name, shake their hand, say it's so nice to meet you, and you leave, and you always have a good impression. Like, you can never fail with a good handshake. Smile, say, what's your name again? Like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. Smile, shake their hand. Or if you know their name, if you remember their name, if you'd already gotten their name and you're just like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. All right, I'm this, like, oh, Allison, so nice to meet you. It's great to meet you. Have a wonderful day. And then you walk away with a smile and you're all set. You leave a good impression. And that's always good because you never know who they'll talk to, and you always want to leave any conversation with the person being on created equal terms where they're not thinking that you are a massive jerk that can't be trusted. You are trustworthy. I hope that people watching my channel are trustworthy. But that's the way you do it. People who are charmers don't need to watch this. They don't need to learn about, socialization. So anyway, I need to go back to resting. I love you guys so much. I hope that helps. So just don't be an open book, just there is such a thing as listening face. Put some boundaries up or whatever. Don't share everything about your life. Don't share everything about your kids and everything like that. Find topics that are safe. Like, that was one thing that was very interesting I noticed in our conversation, is that it wasn't until like 16 minutes in that I found out where he actually lived. We had been talking for like 16 minutes till I found out where, we even talked about where our houses were. We were in such conversation. And that was the thing of this thing of like pulling away, and we were like out here and just testing the water of getting to know each other on basic things until finally we started talking about like, oh, well, where are you actually here? Like, it was interesting to me now that I think about it. We actually talked about places further away, like, oh, this place and oh, this place. And we talked about all the areas surrounding our homes, but we didn't actually say which home was ours, like which home, where is your home exactly? Because we were at the end of the trail. Neither of us mentioned, like, which exactly is our home. Neither of us mentioned that until 16 minutes in. And that was both of us being, like, boundaries out here, waiting to see if, like, you're trustworthy. Do I listen? Or do we each see each other as created equal? Do we kind of, like, are we okay with saying where we live? Does that make sense? And even though, like, he'd have to go see where I walked or whatever, it's it's really letting someone in to say, like, that's my house right there. Neither of us started that way. That's a smart way to go. Like, you don't know where they live. I said, I think that's my neighbor. I didn't know if it was my neighbor, and I learned a lot more about him, and we were talking a lot before. And then he was the one that said, well, I'm actually right there. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I followed with that and said, I'm here. You know what I mean? Like, so there's just, you wait. And 16 minutes is a long conversation. You can get a lot done in 16 minutes if you start timing conversations. And so you just test those boundaries or whatever. So you put boundaries out and you wait and guard and guard and guard. And there's lots of things that you can talk about. And the way you build the talking is just approach it as learning. Like, oh, I'm learning about that. What can you tell me about? You know about this area? I don't know about that area. Why don't you teach me about that area? I'm curious. And then you grow as a person and you learn about them. And then you also teach them that you're trustworthy, that you won't judge them on everything they do, and that they can actually talk to you and be safe around you, and you're not like an axe murderer. That's really what you're teaching them in those first few minutes, is that you can just listen to them as a human and treat them as a human. That's really the goal. They don't know you're human yet. You're teaching them that as you listen to them and learn from them, And then after a while, after a girl gets comfortable, you'll notice that then she'll finally, once she feels like, okay, I'm safe with you, then she'll ask you, like, well, what is it that you do? Like, she'll finally get comfortable. And once she's comfortable and she can let some guard down, then she's interested in learning about you. So, and then she'll talk to you if guys are listening to this, and vice versa. Anyway, I love you guys so much. Have a good one. And subscribe, I guess. And then videos are here. And then, donate down below. Just $1 a month if you want to donate. Just 12 for the year and be done for the year. Yay, I'd love that. And you can donate more if you like, but just $1 a month would be so helpful. I love you guys so much. You're helping me get better. And I'm really, really grateful for that, because I could not get this far without you. We are an amazing team. I'm very, very grateful for that. So thank you so much. All right. See ya. Bye.